Namanda, 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 namanda.
Good morning. My name is Judy Cano, and I would like to welcome everyone to this morning's service. I was invited by my cousin a few weeks ago to attend an event at the Southern Alameda County Buddhist Church. And since I didn't know anyone at this particular event, I was glad and even thankful to sit next to a very friendly and outgoing SACBC member who had traveled to Japan in May to attend the celebration of the 850th birthday of Shinran Shonin and the 800th anniversary of the Jodo Shinshu teaching. He talked about the highlights of this amazing Bay District tour, and in particular, listening to the moving and powerful sounds from the hundreds of people chanting the sutra together. He shared his experiences with such joy and exuberance, saying that for him, it was truly a trip of a lifetime. This morning is not about a celebration, but a special memorial service observed each year for members of OBWA to honor and to pay tribute to two important ladies in Shinran Shonin's life. They are his wife, Eshinni, regarded by many as the mother of Jodo Shinshu, and their daughter, Kakushinni, who cared for him in his final years. Upon his death, she carried on his legacy, establishing the Jodo Shinshu Hongwanji-ha temple, whose name means the Temple of the Primal Vow. We also take this opportunity to commemorate Lady Yoshiko Ohtani, the spouse of the 23rd Monshu, Koshu Ohtani, and she dedicated her life to the Nembutsu teachings and visited temples around the world to revitalize the Buddhist Women's Association. She also organized the very first World Buddhist Women's Convention, and in fact, this May, the 17th World Buddhist Convention took place in Kyoto. This morning, we are here to take time to reflect, honor, and appreciate the significant and historic impact from these remarkable ladies that enabled us to listen and to receive the teachings of Shinran Shonin. And as members of OBWA, we can continue their legacy, embracing the Nembutsu in our daily lives, so that in 50 years, the next generation will be able to attend another auspicious joint celebration in Japan and experience a trip of a lifetime. Next, we will have Sutra Chanting, Sanbutsuge, which is on page 22 in the small purple book.
Namanda, 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 namanda. We are gathered in the presence of Amida Buddha, the embodiment of wisdom and compassion, to observe this memorial service for Eshinni, Kakushinni, and Lady Yoshiko Ohtani. and reflecting on the lives of these Buddhist women who are so important to our Pure Land School, Jodo Shinshu Hongwanji-ha, may we be grateful for this opportunity to hear the Buddha Dharma, and may we find opportunities to hear the Dharma in our everyday lives. Tosha Nichi ga tsumani Shuko enyo Kai shitsu onpei Yunyaku jumok Nyorai yogen Chose murin Shogaku dayon Koru jippo Kaimon shojin Sanmai chie Itoku munyo Shushoke Jintai zennen Shobutsu hokai Gujin jin no Kugo gaitai Mumyo yokunu Seson yomu Nino shishi Jin toku munyo Kukun kodai Chie jin myo Komyo iso Shindo dai sen Ganga sabuts Zai shoho Kado shoji Mifugedatsu Fusejoi Kainin shojin Nyoze samai Chie ijo Gosei tokubutsu Fugyo shigan Isai kuku Isadai am Keshi ubutsu Yakusen okuman Muryo daisho Shunyo goja Kuyo isai Shito shobutsu Funyo gudo Kensho fukyak Hinyo goja Shobutsu sekai Bufukake Mushu setsudo Komyo shisho Henshi shokok Nyoze shojin Ijin nanyo Ryoga sabutsu Kokudo dai ich Goshuki Shimyo Dojo Chozetsu Kokunyo Nayom Nimu Toso Gato Aimi Dodatsu Isai Jipporai Sho Shinnetsu Shoujo Itoga Kok Keraku Annom Kobutsu Shimyo Zega Shinsho Hotsugan no Hi Riki Shoshoyok Jippo Sesom Chiemuge Joryo Shisom Chiga Shingyo Kenyo Shinshi Shoku Dokuchu Gagyo Shojin Ninju Fuke Namandabu 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 Gamni Shikudoku Byodo Seisai Dohoten Bodaishin Ojo An Dakok. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda Butsu, Nam.
Next, we will recite the three treasures on page, you can find that on page 3 in the small purple book.
So if you're here for the first service, you know what to think about. The three treasures. Hard is it to be born into human life, now we are living it. Difficult is it to hear the Buddha Dharma, now we hear it. If we do not deliver ourselves in the present life, no hope is there that we shall be freed from suffering and sorrow in the ocean of birth and death. Let us reverently take refuge in the three treasures of the truth. I take refuge in Buddha. May we all together absorb into ourselves the principle of your way to enlightenment and awaken in ourselves your supreme will. I take refuge in Dharma. May we all together be submerged in the depth of the doctrine and gain wisdom as deep as the ocean. I take refuge in Sangha. May we all together become units in true accord in your life of harmony in a spirit of universal oneness, freed from the bondage of selfishness. Even through myriad ages of kalpas, hard is it to hear such an excellent, profound, and wonderful doctrine. Now we are able to hear and receive it. Let us thoroughly understand the true meaning of the Tathagata's teaching. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Nama. Nama.
Next, Reverend Bridge will deliver his Dharma message.
Namanda, namanda. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our Oakland Buddhist Women's Association Eshinni, Kakushinni, and Lady Yoshiko Ohtani Memorial Service. Let's see. So this morning, I talked about Mahayana Buddhism. Mahayana Buddhism. So if you weren't here, that means great vehicle or large vehicle. And so that vehicle could be a boat or a cart of some sort. Nowadays we would think car, or maybe it's more like a bus, huh? Or how about a big cruise ship, right? As opposed to a little fishing boat, right? This great vehicle. And what kind of popped into my head for this service is there's kind of a classic article in Buddhist studies called "Who Gets to Ride in the Great Vehicle?" Right? Here we have this giant ship of Buddhism, a certain type of Buddhism, but who gets to ride in it? Who is included in this? One of the classic answers is monks and nuns, laymen and laywomen. Okay, that's kind of the classic answer. Kind of implies maybe that other kinds of Buddhism might not include everyone, or maybe they put more emphasis on monastics. Right? Or maybe it is very much a male-dominated kind of system. But Mahayana has within it this, I think, core message. Who gets to ride in the great vehicle? Everyone. Right? That no one is excluded from this great vehicle. Now the reality is that throughout history, there's been discrimination, gender discrimination, for one, racial discrimination, right? There's all these different kinds of discrimination that we can have, but I think that gender discrimination has been a strong part of the cultures that Buddhism developed in, right? Whether it's India, Central Asia, China, other Asian countries leading to Japan. One area that I saw this just this morning, I was supposed to be working on my talks, but instead I'm looking at my phone and I'm reading New York Times, and found this article about Mongolia. So I just found this out. Apparently, Mongolia has a system, because they're also esoteric Buddhism, Vajrayana Buddhism, like Tibet. There's actually Vajrayana Buddhism in Japan too. Tendai has some, and Shingon is especially this Vajrayana, esoteric Buddhism, but intimately connected to Mahayana. So you know how the Dalai Lama is a reincarnation of the previous Dalai Lama? And on and on and on and back, and supposed to be an incarnation of Avalokiteshvara, Kannon Bosatsu, right? And so this system, it's really kind of an interesting system, right? And if you've ever seen the movie Kundun, was a Martin Scorsese kind of biography of the Dalai Lama, and in that film, they show these scenes from early on, where the previous Dalai Lama has passed, they've waited the right amount of time, and now this is early 20th century, right? So they're scouring the countryside, trying to find the previous Dalai Lama's reincarnation, right? He's been reborn again. They're trying to find him. So watch that movie if you can. It's pretty interesting. And they have this baby. They think they found the right place. I was talking about this a few weeks ago too, right? They think they found the right place because of mystic visions that they had, and then they put these items out, glasses, maybe a stamp, the big honko thing, right? And they have this stuff laid out, and they bring the baby over, and the baby looks and grabs the glasses. And they're like, oh, okay, right? And maybe grab something else. So some of those items belonged to the previous Dalai Lama, many didn't. And the baby grabs the right stuff. So they're like, this is him, we found him. We found the Dalai Lama. right? And then that child will be educated within that system to be the next priest king of Tibet, right? Until China invades, right? So this historical thing, and you might be like, yeah, whatever. Well, it's happening again. In Mongolia, they Mongolia apparently went communist and got rid of the system, but apparently they secretly had the reincarnation of he's not called a Dalai Lama, I can't remember what he's called, but it's a different word. He was living in India the whole time. And in 2002 or 2006, when Mongolia had a democratic election, he was able to come out of hiding and live in Mongolia, right? With being recognized as he was the one who was supposed to be the leader. Because this person is the leader king, the kind of priest king, Lama king of Mongolia. He died. They selected a new one. Dalai Lama announced it like a few months ago or maybe a year ago or so. And so really interesting, similar story. They brought all these kids over. One of the kids goes and grabs the right thing and sits in his previous advisor's lap and stuff. So they're like, it's him. We found him again. Why am I talking about this? Partly because this is part of living Buddhism today. It sounds totally different than what we do, right? But interesting, right? That still ideas of reincarnation, right? Alive and well. I think a lot of times we think, ridiculous. Nobody these days would believe something like that. Well, that's just one viewpoint among many from our, seemingly enlightened viewpoint, and yet, I'll stop going on that train. But, right, that it's happening, right? That the leader of a country is being selected, right, based on these ideas. Why am I bringing it up here? Only boys, right? Only male children are brought, right? So here's Mahayana Buddhism, great vehicle, everyone can ride, right? And yet the leader's got to be a boy, right? So to me, it was just really interesting to read this morning, not only because these ancient Buddhist, and it's not only Buddhist, right? It's Mongolia, so I think there's some of the indigenous religion mixed in too. Just like in Japan, very often Shinto and Buddhism are mixed together. Right? But and yet on this political level. And so China, so now the worry is China imports and exports a lot of stuff with Mongolia. Apparently Mongolia is really industrialized, mining, right? That they have very rich families that were able to get into the mining industry. So that's another question. Why was the kid who was selected a rich kid? Why was the kid who was selected from a very rich family, right? What's going on? Did they pay him off? Did they, So there's all these questions about it. But politically, it's dangerous because China is totally against this system. China says we select, right? China, the atheist communist country, says we select the Dalai Lama, we select the Panchen Lama, we select the Mongolian Lama, right? You people don't get to do this. So by acknowledging the Dalai Lama's role in this, China's arch enemy, right? It's going to have political fallout, I think, coming up in the years to come. And then the kid's family wasn't so into it, but they said, well, and actually he's a twin. So they said, our son has to receive a regular education as well. And when he turns 18, he gets to decide, is what the parents want. Right? And him and his twin are receiving both educations. And no one even knows which is which. Really, and guess what? He was born in Washington, D.C. He's a U.S. citizen. Whoa. Right? Is that going to protect him maybe? Is that political? Right? All this stuff in this Buddhist, certain kind of Buddhist situation. Our system, totally different. So can you see Eshinni on the screen there? Is she still up there? It's kind of a dark image, right? It's a smaller image. I think that's a picture of the earliest image of Eshinni. Now, if you look up here at the Naijin, let me put it on the screen for people who are online. Here, that picture. So That's the one I have on the screen. If you're online, that's the one that is the real one. And then here on the Maijoku, the table, that's our Eshinni image here at church. It was actually donated by Sylvia Nomura. I mentioned that, I think, during the pandemic. There's still the paper on the back. So she donated it, I think, after a trip or something, or after a convention. So we have this picture of Eshinni, Shinran's wife. So our system is totally different than the Dalai Lama system, right? Than the Tibetan system and that esoteric system. Shinran was a monk who married. He married Eshinni. They had children, right? And so normally, monk means celibate, right? Normally a monk is celibate, and that's what this young Mongolian kid is going to have to be too, apparently, right? So outside of Japan, most kinds of Buddhism, the monks are celibate, and nuns are celibate too. Right? But despite the fact that monks were supposed to be celibate, Shinran married and had children. And then his descendants, so Kakushinni, she didn't, well, it's interesting. So look at the picture of Eshinni. Right? She's a nun. That's what the ni means too, Eshinni. Right? That the ni implies that she's a nun. So it's really interesting. When did she become a nun? Later in her life? Before they got married? If a monk can get married, why not a nun, right? So we don't know. Even this picture is from 1300s, right? And so at least 100 years later, and you know, this being probably the earliest one. So we really don't know what her monastic status was, you know, when they were married and when they had children. I can't find our Kakushinni picture. We talked about it. We have a Kakushinni picture too, and I think that picture is probably even from much later. Right? And so she's depicted as a nun as well. I think there's some confusion from earlier pictures. So this is really hard to know. We don't have photographs from that. Right? We don't have a lot of information, even about Shinran, about Eshinni. But what we do have are letters, right? And so that's kind of one of the most fascinating parts of this story, is that we have Eshinni's letters to Kakushinni. And they were only discovered in the 20th century, rediscovered, right? They were held onto, they were protected. They were put in the Ryukoku library vault, I think, and then forgotten. And so they were rediscovered early 20th century, I think Meiji period. And so these letters, there's only a few of them, 10 or 12 or something. And so if you have this book at home, The Life of Eshinni, I bet a lot of you have it, right? You probably got it like 20, 30 years ago at a BWA convention, FBWA or something, right? But this is a great book. It's by Yoshiko Ohtani. And who the other person that we're honoring, right? The current Monshu's grandmother, huh? And so it has the story of Eshinni from, you know, around the time that the book was written, which is, I forget exactly when. I think it's from the 80s, maybe 70s. But it does have the letters, and I wanted to just share one with you, letter 4. So, okay, so this is, remember, Kakushinni was with Shinran in Kyoto. Eshinni stayed up in Echigo, where Shinran had been exiled to, right? So she stayed behind while he went down to Kanto and went off. Well, maybe they were in Kanto together, but she's back at Echigo. He's gone off to Kyoto. They think to work on Kyogyo Shinsho and work on his books and stuff. So Kakushinni's with him, taking care of him towards the end of his life. Okay? So that's why we have these letters. It makes sense that we wouldn't have the letters from Kakushinni to Eshinni, because that's way off in the boonies, you know, and so who's going to protect them and carry them and bring them down, right? So we don't have those. That would be fascinating, huh? To get both sides of the correspondence. But we only have the one side, these letters that went from Echigo to Kyoto. So it makes sense, right, that they're in Kyoto. That's where Hongwanji is, gets started later, and so they were held on to, right? Let me just read this letter. It's short. So this is Eshinni talking to their daughter. I am writing this letter and sending it to you because while your father was alive, it was not necessary for me to say these things. So I didn't mention them. But now that he is gone, I would like to have you remember in your heart what kind of person he was. I hope that we will have someone who writes well recopy this so that you can keep it. I would also like to have that scroll with your father's image on it. I've written to you about that time that your father became very ill with a bad cold. It was from the 14th day of the 4th month of the year you were born. For this year, I have turned 82 years old. From the 11th month of the year before last to the 5th month of last year, my illness was so severe that every day I was expecting to die at any moment, but somehow I am still living. But I may die of starvation because of this year's famine. I am saddened that, in spite of this good opportunity to send you something, I am unable to send you anything since your father's death, but there is nothing that I can do. Please relay to Masukata the gist of this letter. Since it is an effort for me to write, I will not be writing to Masukata. 10th day of 2nd month. So, she doesn't say that much, and yet, writing to her after Shinran has passed, sounds like my family forgot to ask stuff of my dad, forgot to ask stuff of my mom. I got one relative left that I can ask, right? Stories of my parents or grandparents or whatever. All my family's gone, pretty much. One aunt that can speak English, right? So when she says, while your father was alive, it was not necessary for me to say these things. So I didn't mention them. But now that he is gone, I'd like to have you remember in your heart what kind of person he was. It's interesting because she doesn't say that much about him, right? And so, but she's really sick. Sounds like she's famished, right? She's been ill for the past year. She's starving because of a famine, right? And so she's trying to communicate to their daughter, right? And getting some stuff out and then just having to stop. Right? And so these letters are just so fascinating because it's just like everyday people. This is the core of our tradition. Right? It's not about the minister. It's not just about Shinran. It's not just about the leader. Right? That this is our kind of Buddhism started with them, with Shinran, with Eshinni. Probably other monks at that time were doing the thing that makes kids, right? But they weren't supposed to be, and they were doing it in secret. Right? That Shinran and Eshinni got married openly. They were openly married despite Shinran being a monk. And I think I've said that there's new research that shows that Eshinni might have been a member of Honen's community when Shinran joined. We don't know so many of these details, but it's thought that maybe she was already there, right? And Shinran joins. We know from dream records and stuff that he was having issues with sexuality and not being able to curb that as a celibate monk. So he may have, when he joined Honen's group, Honen might have been, marry her. I know you've told me what kind of troubles you're having. Marry her. Just do it. Right? I'm not just talking about getting married too, right? You're a monk, but do it. It's okay. Amida Buddha accepts you as you are. Right? You don't have to hold up to a certain standard. You don't have to observe monastic rules. You don't have to be a good person. You don't have to be perfect. You can live your everyday life, and Amida Buddha will embrace you as you are. And so Shinran and Eshinni manifest that in their lives. After that, we have Renyo over on the left side. Right? He's kind of behind the screen maybe, but he's the 8th descendant of Shinran and Eshinni. Right? Great grandson. Right? So our Dalai Lama is the current Monshu. Right? But our Dalai Lama is not selected through mystical rites and with this idea of reincarnation. Right? Our abbot is a direct blood and dharma lineage of Shinran Shoni, with this system that begins at this time of Shinran and Shinran and Eshinni, I'm sorry. Right? So Eshinni is just such a huge part of our Buddhism. This Buddhism that lets us just be ourselves, right? Lets us live our lives. We don't have to do anything special. We don't have to even be special. We can just be ordinary, and yet grasped by Amida's wisdom and compassion. And I said in the first service, right, that the goal of Buddhism is to become a Buddha, yourself. Right? What other religion lets you do that? Right? It's like you have the top person, if it's God or Jesus or whatever, but you don't get to say, I become Jesus when I'm, some people do, right? But then those are more cult kind of groups, right? But that's not part of their religion. Our religion, you become Buddha. We can become Buddha. Right? And that's what this teaching is, even though we just live ordinary lives. No, actually, because we live ordinary lives, we're grasped by the vow and the compassion of Amida Buddha. And we have, I know a lot of times, modern times, we like to say religion is bad. I don't like religion, right? That I'm spiritual, not religious. But it's because of religion, because of this system, that we're able to encounter this incredible teaching. It's because of the efforts, not just of the monks, right? Not just of certain groups, but women have been so important in the history of Jodo Shinshu. I was actually reading a footnote where it says that in the early communities, in the centuries after, that it was very often a married couple, were born monk and nun, and they're pictured in these kind of picture lineages. And sometimes the children are drawn in there too, right? But that, it seems like at that time, the husband and wife were kind of the priests of that temple. And they were ordained, like me, but not celibate, right? That they were having children, they were kind of being like householders in a way, but also the priests. So this incredible system, I keep wanting to talk more about Kakushinni, but remind me next year. Right? I think a lot of times we put emphasis on Eshinni because we hear her voice more in these letters. I think that's part of it. Right? We don't have Kakushinni, their daughter's voice, because we don't have letters from that time. But maybe you're inspired by today's service to go home and find this book, right? Or maybe in the days and weeks to come, you'll find this book on the shelf. Take it off, right? Pull it off the shelf. You don't have to read the whole thing, but at least look at some of the pictures. Maybe the pictures will draw you in, right? To read maybe again, right? Or maybe for the first time about Eshinni, the wife of Shinran Shonin. But also, if you don't want to read the whole thing, skip towards the back. That's where the letters are, right? And the letters are such a fascinating, how many letters from the, 12th century can you read? 12th, 13th century, right? That's not something we normally do. But we can here and maybe gain some insights into Jodo Shinshu in our kind of Buddhism. So thank you very much. Why don't we conclude the Dharma message with Gasho. Who gets to ride in the great vehicle? Monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen, none are excluded from the great vow of Amida Buddha. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo.
Next, Reverend Bridge will lead us in a beautiful gatha called Seiya, and you can find that on the back of your program.
Yep. And we're going to do the rock version of Reverend Yuki Sugahara, who's currently, I think he's the Rimban of Sacramento Betsuin. Previously he was at Oregon Buddhist Temple and Florin before that, and he's spoken here before, but we get to listen to his version. Okay, let's see. 美しさ誰か知るや雨の謎の瞳輝けばNamo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo.
Well, this concludes our service for today, for this morning. I'd like to thank Reverend Bridge for officiating. Also, thanks to Mika Bridge for arranging the beautiful Nijing flowers. And also a thanks to Ron Nomura and Norman Yoshida for providing the tech support so that this service could be presented on YouTube. And then also a special thanks to all of you for attending this morning's service. Stay, for the OBWA members, please stay for our meeting after this service. Thank you.
Oh, thank you to Robert Noguchi, too, for tech support. Let's conclude with Gassho. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo.